Journey of the Sparrows, Chapter 3. We put on our new coats as we got ready to leave Marta's apartment the next afternoon. My coat was the color of wine, and its heaviness reassured me. We fastened Oscar's jacket, and Julia slipped her arms into the sleeves of her black and white checkered coat. But when she tried to button it, she found it wouldn't stretch across her big stomach. "Baby," she giggled, patting her tummy, "what do you think you're doing to your mama's body?" Marta laughed her hearty laugh, her chest and stomach jiggling, and said, "Like with my 7, felt like I was busting out all over." Marta and Julia carried food, and I led Oscar. People who passed us in the street were covered with clothes, but I could see their faces. Some were white, some were brown like ours, and some were much darker. Blacks, Marta called them. Everyone rushed through the cold, and I wondered if they always moved so quickly. A woman shouted to 3 children in English, and 2 men came toward us carrying a loud radio, which was playing a song in Spanish. I glanced away, but I had seen them watch Julia's face, and I felt sharp fear again for a moment. A small man and woman passed, talking a language I'd never heard. I stared at the signs on stores and at the buses that roared down the street. Julia couldn't read. When she was my age, there wasn't a school, but the teacher had come to our village in time for me. That's why Papa thought I was smart, because I learned to read, and also because I could draw the saints. People praised my pictures. One time Papa said, "Maria, you've got brains. If anybody can save this family, it's going to be you." We shivered and stamped our feet. A sign on a bright yellow store announced in Spanish, "Checks cashed, money orders, food stamps." A man was taping up a sign saying "chicken wings" in a food store. Everywhere I saw big cars and heard radios. Televisions, jewelry, and pretty clothes were for sale in store windows. A long black car pulled up to the curb in front of us, and a man in a white suit got out, followed by 5 young Latino women. Each woman wore a long formal dress of a different color, and they were laughing, maybe going to a party. They lifted their skirts carefully above the dirt of the sidewalk as they hurried into a building. I could see high-heeled shoes of pink, yellow, blue, violet, and green that matched the colors of the dresses. Julia pointed to a billboard in Spanish above a grocery store. "Maria, read that for me," she asked. "The woman looks so happy." The sign showed a glowing close-up of a young Latina woman. In one arm, she held a laughing child. With the hand of the other arm, she held up a ticket. We stopped walking and looked up. "Experience the thrill," I read out loud. "Win $1 million, the Illinois lottery." $1 million, I asked Marta. "American money? We couldn't win it, could we?" Marta laughed, shrugged her shoulders, and lifted her hands. "Well, you might, if you bought a ticket. I saw a poor black woman on television once. Something like 8 kids she had. She'd just won, was having a fit. But not other people here like us. I know some who try. Tomas gave me a ticket for my birthday last year. I planned all night what I'd do with my winnings." Julia's eyes were bright and shining. "We're here in the north," I thought, "where anything's possible." We walked a little farther, then heard a rumbling and a crashing screech. A train streaked past above us, up on a bridge built high over the street. The bridge vibrated with excitement. Our mouths opened, and we watched it. Then we all had to run and catch up with Marta. In my astonishment, I barely noticed the snow. Finally, Marta led us to the door of another apartment. I stopped and pulled on Julia's arm. "Look, Julia, Guardias." A poster of a soldier was in one window, with the letters ARMY at the bottom. "No, no, no," Marta shook her head. "That's just an army recruiting poster. Somebody stuck it in the window. No need to worry." Marta opened the door of the building, and we stepped inside. It was dark and smelled of urine. We heard loud rock music thudding behind a door. A black man came hurrying down the steps and went past us. A door next to us opened, and a heavy blonde woman with few teeth stood in it. I bent down, grabbed Oscar, and pulled him into the shadows. A skinny blonde boy stared out from under the woman's arm. Marta started slowly in English, "New ones, just come," and handed the woman our money. The woman shrugged, and the little boy pulled the door closed, so we were alone again in the entrance. The people upstairs will help you handle her," Marta said, motioning at the blonde woman's door as she led us up the steps. Puffing with the effort, she stopped on the third floor, and Julia and I glanced at each other. Julia was pale. We were both frightened, and Oscar clung to me. Marta knocked on a door, and a man, Latino like us, opened it. I heard a television and smelled beans. "I've brought new ones, Julia Cordoba and Maria and Oscar Acosta. Let us inside," Marta said. She turned to us. "It's safe. Don't be afraid." There were many men and one woman in the room. 3 old couches were placed along the walls facing 2 televisions, a gigantic one, which wasn't working, and a small black and white one, which was. A man on the couch by the window held a harmonica, and when the door was shut and locked again, he began to play a song from home. Marta introduced us to Alicia, a small woman about the age of Mama. "Alicia will help you," Marta said, "and hopefully find you jobs." She hugged us all against her soft, plump body. "Don't be afraid of the men," she said in her strong voice. "They're good and usually gone working." "Gracias," I whispered. "Muchas gracias." "Gracias, Marta, for all you've done," Julia repeated. "We'll miss you." "Come visit. We'll have a party. Honest to God, sometimes we have some beautiful fun, even up here in the damn cold weather." She smiled broadly at us, left the apartment, and we were alone with the others. Alicia sighed, introduced us to her husband, and led us from the main room into a smaller room where a man sat on a mattress on the floor. Another mattress was propped up against a wall. Light came into the room through a window with yellow curtains. A plant with pointed red leaves growing in a coffee can, and 2 plastic pink roses lined up on the windowsill, glowing in the afternoon light. The man nodded and stood up. I noticed that he had a woman's name tattooed on one arm. A line had been tattooed through the name, as if he'd changed his mind. "Bienvenidos," he said, nodded again, and left the room. As he shut the door behind him, I saw 2 posters of rock singers taped to the door. A carefully hand-drawn sign saying "Hector and Rosa Forever" hung on the opposite wall, and a magazine photo of a smiling child wearing clown makeup had been tacked to the next to the sign. Alicia said, "We'll make this your mattress and place," and pulled the small mattress down onto the floor. She pushed it into position beneath the window, and with the help of her husband, she pinned curtains from a rope that was fastened to the ceiling and divided the room like a clothesline. "Now you'll have privacy," she said. She led us back through the main room to the room in which they cooked. She explained that the old stove no longer worked, but they had a refrigerator. A hot plate with a pot of soup was on the counter. The faucet wouldn't turn on. They got water from the bathroom tub. But everything was clean. Pictures from magazines and calendars were tacked to the walls. And a bucket of lard sat on a table next to another plant in a coffee can. The sunlight coming through the windows was growing dim. Alicia switched on the lights, then gave us corn tortillas and a bowl of soup to share. I looked out the kitchen window, was amazed at how high we were, and saw that there were other buildings even higher. Lights blinked on from building to building, and I wondered how many people were hiding. I stood in the arched doorway to the kitchen, eating my tortillas and watching the men in the main room playing cards. The floor of the main room sloped away from the window, and the deep blue walls had large shapes like clouds where the paint had chipped off. A new tire was placed carefully next to the black and white television. I thought, could someone like us have a car? A clock, shaped like a fan used by a Mexican dancer, ticked on one wall. The face of the clock, centered in the golden fan, was painted blue like the sky and surrounded by a garden of flowers. A butterfly fastened to the second hand of the clock circled through the flowers like among the lilies at home. I picked Oscar up and carried him to the clock so he could get a better look. He reached out his hand to touch the butterfly. I stepped back, and the man with the tattoo said to us, "It's Alicia's. She's the one who keeps this place going." Alicia didn't look at us directly, and she said little as we placed our leftover food in the refrigerator and our clothes in the closet. We thanked her for her help, told the men good night, washed our scrapes and cuts again, and went into our mattress. Finally, we had our place. Oscar was soon asleep on our mattress, and Julia sat next to him, her eyes closed, her hands on her pregnant stomach. I squatted next to her on the floor, my back against the wall, and listened to the gentle harmonica. My eyes grew heavy, and I nearly fell asleep, but suddenly a siren from the street below split the air. I jolted up, my heart pounding, and thought, "The Guardias! They've come." Julia also jerked up, and Oscar began to cry. I reached to the mattress and pulled him toward me. He threw his arms around my neck, and I felt the press of his wet face. "Maria," he sobbed, "the shadow man is coming." Then we heard the siren move past us and away. Julia breathed deeply, and I rocked Oscar back and forth in my arms. The light in our room flicked on, and Alicia pulled back the curtain. "I heard him cry," she said, gazing at Oscar. "The police go by here often. We learned not to be afraid." She crossed herself. "I brought you a calendar of Our Lady. I thought she might give you peace. There's a nail for it already on the wall." She hung the calendar where we'd see it. It showed the crown, face, shoulders, and hands of a statue of the Virgin from a Mexican church. The Virgin was a little different from our Virgin at home, but she looked at us with tender care, and tears rolled down her sad, gentle face. Her arms reached upward as in comfort, and her white and blue veils, gold crown, and embroidered dress reflected her beauty. "Alfredo's Mexican Restaurant," the calendar said. "Gracias," we said to Alicia with awe. "Leave the light on tonight and other nights if you need to," Alicia said. "It'll help so you're not so afraid." I looked up at the light bulb with relief. Darkness reminded me of the crate. "You're kind, Alicia," Julia said, her voice tired. Alicia nodded and stepped back behind the curtain. I shifted Oscar, who was still whimpering, and looked at the calendar. "See, Oscar Sparrow," I said, "Our Lady is here to keep us safe, almost like in the church at home." He turned toward the calendar and stopped crying. I smiled. "Good, Oscar. Already she's making you better. Lie back down. You can still see it." He settled back down into the mattress, but looked up at me. "Story, Maria. Tell me a story, like Mama," he begged. I took a deep breath. I didn't know if I could do it after all we'd been through. "If you can," Julia pleaded with me, her voice exhausted. "Maybe it'll calm him." I nodded and swallowed, thinking about the stories Papa had told us, and that Mama continued after we lost Papa. I leaned back against the wall. "In a warm village with 1,000 colors," I began, "there lived a little sparrow who loved a little boy." Oscar lay on his side, his cheek on his hands and his eyes staring at the Virgin. "The sparrow came to the little boy when the sun woke up in the morning, and it left the boy each evening as the sun folded its clothes and lay down for the night." Both Oscar's and Julia's eyes closed. Now, this was a very brave little sparrow, blessed by the Virgin. It wasn't afraid, not of cruel men or soldiers. The little boy's family lived in a home made of sticks, among butterflies and flowers. But bad men came one time, right when the sun was setting and after the sparrow had returned to the sky. Only the stars saw what happened. I swallowed and was silent for a few seconds before I continued. "The men stomped on the flowers, they poisoned the butterflies, and they burned the family's house. In the light of the fire, the children saw the colors of their village melt, then turn gray." Oscar was nearly sleeping, but Julia's dark eyes were now open, and she was listening to the story. I stretched out my legs and kept speaking. "The next morning, when the sparrow came back with the sun, it found the family crying. The sparrow whispered to the father, 'Come with me, I'll lead you, and I'll take care of your children.' And so the family began their journey. They traveled up mountains, into the mist, and they traveled down valleys, down where rivers sang them songs, and ferns and grasses gave them beds to sleep in. Each night they stopped traveling, and each night they waited for the sparrow to return with the sun to guide them to the next morning. Finally, just before dark, they came to a huge river. Soldiers were camped on both sides. The family crouched in the grass, waiting for the morning and the sparrow. But partway through the night, soldiers with guns came after them, and the soldiers grabbed the mama and papa and led them away. The children lay alone in the dark grass, and even the stars were crying. I stopped and looked at Oscar and Julia. They were both sleeping, but I continued for myself. Then the sparrow came down from the night sky. It brought light and rainbows of colors and landed on the little boy's shoulder. "Don't be afraid," the sparrow said to the children. "I'll never leave you now, not even to join the sun. We'll cross the river together. I'll keep you safe. When you're tired, I'll stretch until you can rest on my wings. And whenever you need me, I'll give you blessings and colors." I closed my eyes, lay down on the mattress, and breathed deeply. I don't think I dreamed, but I believe I remembered. I was very young and lay on my mat on the floor at home, watching Mama. The glowing coals of the cooking fire outlined the kind lines on her face and her strong hands as she knelt, fingering her beads, and prayed the Holy Rosary in front of our picture of Our Lady. "Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee," she said. The light of the candle in front of her seemed to enter her eyes, and their tiredness ended. I wanted her, reached out to my young child's hands, and whispered, "Mama." She turned toward me. "Oh, Maria, you're awake." I stumbled to her, and she picked me up and held me against her. I smelled her smell, the other smell of beans, coffee, and cooking fires, and she said, "Mijita, I'll take you outside. Our Lady is especially strong tonight." She carried me out our door, set me on the ground, and knelt beside me, pointing to the stars. I heard crickets and night birds and smelled coffee blossoms and the breeze. There was no moon, and the stars shimmered. "See," Mama said, "see that band of stars?" I looked, and the stars swept together. "That's the veil of Our Lady," she said. Then she pointed to other brighter stars. "And those stars are her crown. She's always with us, just like the stars." She pulled me against her. "What I believe, Maria, is that when one of our babies dies, the baby becomes a star and joins Our Lady." "Like Felipe and Celia?" I asked. "Yes, Maria. There's Felipe, there's Celia, there's Luis and Paco, and there's the one with no name." She pointed to different parts of the sky and named my dead brothers and sister. "They're all there," she said. She carried me back inside and patted my face. I felt warm and protected, so I closed my eyes. I wondered which star was Papa.